Hi everybody, this is Esha Oberoi from Leora.ai and you're listening to the Leora Workplace Wellbeing Podcast, the channel that provides you micro learnings. This is for everyone that aspires for a great place to work, whether you're working on yourself, your team, or your organization. I hope that you receive some valuable insights today. We are talking with Chris Volpe, CEO and co-founder at Fox Wardrobes, and he has a journey to share himself, how he moved from and operating in old paradigm thinking of working hard, slogging to get success, to a state of flow and finding joy in work. So Chris, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Hey everyone, and hey Esha. It's good to chat to you.
Give us a little bit of context. How did you even fall into business? How did you know that, the entrepreneurial journey was going to be for you?
Yeah, so I was working, corporate background is chartered accountant. So I was working in corporate accounting and turning around companies that were going insolvent. So I was working in one of the large accounting practices and just knew I was seeing what not to do. And I knew that my journey, I wanted to go into business and see and implement the things that I saw not to do and grow something that would flourish and, add value to my life, the people that work for me and also clients. So I wanted to move out of the insolvency realm and into growing successful business rather than one's going broke. And at the time, I set up a fun outdoor seating business that was weekends and concerts, and we were selling seats, cushions, and blankets, and they were called the Chalazy Comfy Combo. And that got me out of corporate accounting. It was more of like a dabble that kind of got big enough for me to take the leap and go full time. But it was actually just concert, summer season, festival season, so I had a lot of free time. And my brother, who was a cabinet maker, he had started his cabinetry, custom cabinetry business during the global financial crisis, like 2008 kind of thing. And he was getting to burnout and overwhelm. And he asked me if I could come in and help him because of my accounting background and the systems and that sort of thing. He asked me to come in and help him during the off season. Anyway, we were kind of yin and yang. For me, it felt like a great opportunity to help him. My dad had actually, one of the big reasons when I was a kid that he said that he got divorced from my mum was because the working too many hours and it putting pressure on the relationship and the family life. So I had this passion to go to sort of build my own business successfully, but also share how you can do it, have fun in business and make money at the same time and create some freedom. So I had this sort of thing in the back of my mind because of that childhood experience, going through that childhood trauma around divorce and stuff like that. And my brother being overwhelmed, and he just had his first kid, and he was, it was putting challenges on his relationship. It just felt like a real calling for me to come in and help him. So it started as one off season and it turned into what it is now, a business partnership and a company that we've grown now to 40 staff, and it's called Fox Wardrobes and Cabinetry.
Chris, did you always inherently know that you wanted to experience joy at work because of what happened, with the divorce? Or was that a journey in itself of, therapy or accessing individual experts to help you unpack that?
Yeah, it was kind of there was something in it, and I would say it still is a driving motivator for what I do today. Even like say coming on this podcast to share my story, a reason why I like to share the things that I've learned and in business and what I'm doing is because of hopefully it can help someone else that's on a similar journey, or has had, something challenging happen that they want to overcome. I felt like that's a driver, but then it was a personal journey through, I actually went more alternative healing path. So I went down for energetic healers and sort of going on retreats and that sort of thing, which allowed for me space, meditation. I went on a journey, went to India and learned yoga and did like a whole bunch of sort of like, I guess some of the Eastern philosophies and shamanism and that sort of thing too. What at the time I didn't, when I was first going on this journey of kind of healing to open up, because I knew that I was doing it in a way that was kind of initially was repeating the patterns that I saw my dad have, or to help what I was doing with my brother Vic and stuff at the start. It was just, it was all constantly hard work and slog, and I was like, I want it to be fun. Like I want it to be more joyful and it to be light. It doesn't have to be so heavy. Business can be a place where we can create win-win-win. So I had this sort of like vision for that, but at the time I didn't know why my reality wasn't mirroring the actual that lightness and fun and all that. And so I sort of, through following intuitive leads, like the first, it could be a book, like I picked up some of Joe Dispenza's stuff, or I bumped into someone that does Kundalini yoga, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try that. And so at first it started out as just sort of like little hunches, and now I can see that I was playing out old beliefs, old patterns that I'd been taught as a kid, that I had the vision for a different way of doing it, but I was kind of just stuck in a repeating cycle of like, hard is better, go big, that's the way. It was just drilled into me. And business is hard, don't trust your staff, like all this stuff that kind of was creating that reality, and things would happen to just prove that you can't trust your staff, or prove that business is hard and all that sort of thing. And I wouldn't say it's not hard. I'd say I'm facing challenges all the time. And as we grow, it's a journey and it's a playground to learn and grow. And but as I've removed each of those little layers of, hey, I don't like that belief anymore, I'm going to actually choose a different story, choose a different belief, that then has allowed my experience of business and the way that I live my life to reflect that. And so everyone will have their own journey of pulling back those layers, and it can be painful. Like I was just telling you before we started, I've just moved back to Sydney from living in Byron for 3 years. And I've just been, the last 6 months, I've been really sad. I've been letting go of that chapter, and it's a part of the process, to feel those and to be challenged by the old beliefs as they go and new ones come. And I'm excited for the next chapter,
Yeah. One thing I want to add here is very obviously similar journey, similar path that I've been on. And one of my favorite books that I picked up in the early stage of my wanting to grow and remove all these limiting beliefs as well was The Surrender Experiment, because I felt it by Michael Singer, and I just want to say that book is so good, especially for people that are in corporate or in business, because his experience was like, how do you bring joy and lightness into your work, and how do you bring spirituality into your work? Because we are spiritual beings, we are energetic beings, and so that I just want to add that. What an incredible book, and of course Joe Dispenza and the rest. And then the other thing I want to ask you is, another thing from my experience around this has been like, you initially start on this journey, and I want to hear your story, and when you're kind of unpacking all these belief systems, right? All these stories that we know and understand to be the truth, and we want to break them down. It's really painful, and it's sad. And I remember going through a phase in my life where I was like, oh my gosh, every time I come to another story, it's like another layer of sadness, another layer of depression or trauma, right? But then suddenly there's like a tipping point, just like in business. There's like a tipping point where all of a sudden you hit a point of joyfulness, and then the evolution and unpacking starts to become actually more light and joyful, and you go back into this spiral of still, breaking down these patterns, but actually then you start laughing at them and you find them humorous, and you're like, oh great, I'm doing it again, or here it goes again, or this is, an experience that I've lived so many times as a pattern, but now I can laugh at it. Is that kind of what happened with you, or tell us your version of that evolution?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. It's really powerful stuff. The first thing I'd say, one of my mentors and a friend of mine, Matt Omo, he says is you got to feel it to heal it. So whether you believe that or not, when I go through the process of taking those layers and healing, generally the stuff that comes up is from maybe the challenge or the trauma or whatever it was. And so there's a feeling process. So, but to talk to your point, as I've developed myself and my maturity in my healing process, so following my intuition, knowing when something's coming, like knowing that I needed to move back to Sydney and what's that going to bring, is it's lighter, that process, because I know, there's a letting go happening. I'm actually sad because I'm missing Byron and the experience I had. One of the reasons, where I told you about my childhood, the parents being divorced, it was they were quite like really angry with each other. So it was quite an intense separation. And so my mum moved to Byron. That's why I had a close connection to the area. So as a kid, I was 3 years old, the parents had separated, and I grew up and moved back to Sydney to live with my dad when I was 16, 17. And when I moved to Byron just before COVID hit, I went and went back. It was like closing a loop, because when I left when I was younger, I had a lot of negativity around the area because of what my dad had told me and kind of like drummed into me as a kid. And then I moved to Sydney and, went to uni, had finished schooling and built my business. And then when I moved back to Byron, it was actually like almost unraveling those layers of childhood that was pretty painful when I was there early on. And so it was kind of like a full circle experience. And a good example of flow and synchronicity was when I first moved to Byron, I knew I needed to go. It was just like a pull. And a friend of mine called me and said, look, there's a healer in Byron you should see, and I think it would really be great for you. And I was like, there's hundreds of healers in Byron. That's what they do. Anyway, I'm going back and I'm feeling like it's the right thing for me, but knowing I had my childhood with my mum there and grew up there and there was a lot of stuff going on. Anyway, and then I get a message 2 days later from another friend, a different one, saying, you got to see this guy, James Pask. He's just like really good energetic healer. He does this holographic kinetics process, like going through like timelines and stuff. And so I was like, what is this? The same guy's been referred to me twice in the space of 2 days. I've just moved to Byron. I was like, I've got to call this guy. I'm just going to take that as a sign. So I call him up and I'm like, two people have told me to come and see you, like something going on here. I'm just going to book in a session because I'm going to trust it. He goes, okay, I'll text you my address. So I get off the phone, I've booked the session. He texts me the address and it was my childhood home. He lived in my childhood home.
That's insane.
I had the session in the bedroom that I had as a kid. It's like,
that is insane.
You can't there's something. So to the surrender experiment, there's there's so much happening beyond what I can, my little self here knows what's going on. Out of all the healers, all the kinesiologists, the whatever there is in bar, like shaman, like, you know, different healers, mainstream healers, I end up in the bedroom that I grew up in as a kid when I was going through my parents' divorce and like all of that stuff. And so I went in that session, and you imagine how powerful it was knowing that I'm there and there's this like greater sense of trust. Like I booked that from 2 messages, 2 signs, and I went and boom, like I was just let's do the work, you know. So the first thing is those things are becoming easier and easier, because now I know the more I'm working on myself, the more I'm into implementing it into my life and into my business, the more that the right person shows up at the right time, and there's normally, you know, I just had one of the reasons I'm back in Sydney is really a significant person in the business, in the wardrobe business, has left and moved back overseas, and he was close as an owner in the business. And it was like, I trust now, because of the continual building that muscle and getting lighter in the process of healing. It's like, I trust now that that person's leaving for the best for them and the best for us. And how can we make that ending of the relationship? Where can we get the lessons out of it? Can we get the learnings out of it? It's not going to be easy. Sometimes it's really challenging, but how can we honor that process of the ending? And so, yeah, I feel that it's getting lighter. I feel that there's more joy in it. And the surrender experiment, it's funny that you brought up the surrender experiment book, because I think it was 2 years ago now, I read that with my partner, Rosanna, on the way. We went on a van trip to the Great Ocean Road, and we read it and we said, we're going to make the year, that next year, because it was over Christmas, like our New Year's resolution was to make that year a surrender experiment. And so we were in Byron. I ended up buying a nursery business, taking on like a 15-acre property in Byron Bay, taking over this legacy bromeliad nursery that the previous owners, Bob and True, had for like 40 years. And I went from, I took because it was all surrender, right? So I had just pretty much do whatever was coming up. So it was at the start of the year. So the year was last year, but when we did the decision, it was at the end of the prior year. So I get a friend, I went to a party and a friend goes, oh, you'd be great for this Necker Island trip. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. What's that? And he's like, oh, you go visit Richard Branson on Necker Island and there's a leadership business conference. I'm like, oh, cool. And then walk away, and he sends me the link, and then I'm like, okay, I've got to follow this lead. So I open the link. I send Chris Dutton, the CEO, the CEO magazine's the guy who ran it. And I send him a message, go, look, I've been told about this. This guy's connected to you and he's invited me. You know, what's the process? Anyway, it all just started to unfold. So that I ended up having this trip to Necker Island, and I landed. I was in Necker. We had 1 week to learn the bromeliad nursery, and before we had the keys and the previous owners were leaving. So I had to get a guy that I kept bumping into before I left for Necker to go to the nursery before I got back to learn how 2,000 varieties of bromeliads, to then teach me. So when I landed after meeting Richard Branson, having this like amazing experience, to then getting the keys for this nursery and home and acreage, to then get trained by the guy that I kept bumping into every time I was talking about this nursery. So I've had this year of just full surrender. And what I'd say, the beautiful thing that I've got from that, long story short, because there were so many amazing things that came from that year, is that the surrender process for me was like a muscle. Like a lot of the time I was like, this bloody surrender thing, like this is tough because I have to keep letting go of what I wanted to do and surrender into what the flow, where the flow was taking me. But what really, because now I've brought it back in a bit more of goal setting and orientation, but it's a muscle. It's like I continue, I go, okay, yeah, I might want that, but there's probably something bigger or more important that's being guided in. And so I'm less stuck on how I want it to look and more open to whatever's coming. And I just found that year such a powerful process to go through. I highly recommend the book. I think it's an amazing artwork.
Well, you know, as you say that, what this reminds me of is also the Buddhist teaching around how we can live more in harmony in the earthly form, which is that we do have like goals and aspirations, and we do have attachments because they naturally, just inherently as human beings, we have that. But it's like balancing that with the fact that we can also just go into surrender and then accept that we don't need to be so attached. So it's like having the aspiration, but then detaching as you go along, which is the beauty of it, which is actually also the beauty of evolution as humans, right? Because the more we attach, the more painful it gets. Whereas having aspirations but not having the attachment allows for that lightness to come into our decision making, into our path, because we're still moving forward and we're progressing to where we want to be, but without the heaviness of stuck, attached, or do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's like there's this trust. So like I feel so much more at peace with, and it's interesting because in my business, one of my guys that have been with us for a long time now, and he's one of our cabinetry designers. We went through some really challenging times in the business together, and what we learned was this muscle of trust and flow, and kind of like less is more, and understanding when, or what I've sort of, if I try to articulate it with my mind, it's like when I do the things that are really in alignment and that are coming through as important, from like that are aligned, will have a much bigger impact and result. And it's almost like going straight, although it sometimes takes you in a way off because like bromeliads to wardrobes. But I would say like my time, I followed the lead with the bromeliads, and it wasn't the thing. So now I'm not in it anymore. Like I've stepped back. But when it's taught me exactly what I needed to implement into my business, in the wardrobe business. So it's sort of like took me there. So although it's sort of like this concept of I do a few things that are really guided and have a lot of impact, rather than me trying to make it all happen and be a certain way. And I used to be just trying to do so much, and I needed to use more time and more energy and more effort to get to where I wanted to be. But now I just trust that the right person's coming, the right lead, the right team member, and it's so much more easeful. Like like the challenges still come. And I look at it as my playground to learn and grow. It's like this place is still making me confront myself so that I can take those layers back and feel it, heal it, move forward, experience more, and that sort of thing. But I can do it in a more content, more peaceful way, because I'm not attached to a certain outcome or a certain way it needs to look. We're doing wardrobes right now and storage and other cabinetry, but it's like, well, maybe in a few years' time, we won't even be doing that. Who knows? Is whatever we're guided to be doing is sort of where I'm leading this business. And it's like, it's sort of, I feel that we're honoring the flow of life, the thing that's there. And also my own, I'm here having a human experience, I want pleasures of life. I want to enjoy myself. I want to eat good food and have fun and hang out with friends and make love and all of these things. But also by following the flow, I can be not attached to how that needs to look.
Yeah, it's bringing up a lot of things for me. Well, for starters, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you've just given me all these values for 2024, like, go with the flow and surrender and less is more. And then the other thing you just said, what was it? It was less is more, and it'll come back to me. But what it brings up for me is like, we have these, 6 senses. We have 6 senses, but we get so consumed in our 5 senses that we forget about the 6th sense. And it's developing that awareness. Actually, so let's go into that. How do you develop your trust? Because you keep talking about that, like trusting the universe, having your goals, but not getting attached to how it needs to look, like the path needs to look. So where are you building that level of awareness from? And what are those actual techniques, from yoga to mindfulness to shamanic practices? What is the most lightweight stuff that someone can kind of start dabbling into from literally tomorrow?
Yep. So it's definitely a journey of it's a muscle, like it's something that builds over time. And every time that I take action on something that feels good or right, because it's not always, sometimes it's a hard thing to do from where I am now, but then it's taking me to where I am to go, if that makes sense. So it's like when I take action on that lead, let's call it a lead, there's little reinforcements that happen after, or when I'm experiencing the result of the action that I'm taking, that seems to reinforce my muscle that's the intuitive guidance. That's where I needed to go. So a good example, let's say, was that one that I gave you earlier around the phone call, booking in the James Pask healing, and then and then getting the message that it was my childhood home. Like for me, I saw that not as just funny synchronicity world. I saw that as that's validation that I'm trusting the lead coming, and I'm taking action on it, and I'm reinforcing that that's the right next step. And then after it, the result was much more joy, and I just had such a good session with him, and more peace, more contentment. And the number of times, like little things, like now I kind of get I was on the ferry into the city, and I just sort of had this sense, I was like, there's someone I would need to meet here. And it's sort of like and then this guy Stan I knew just pops out, and we have this amazing conversation, and I tuned in because I kind of had the sense that there's someone I was going to meet, and it's like, okay, what's that interaction? So it's like there's a validation if you kind of open to it, and you open the sense to, okay, is there something here for me? Is there something great happening? Then you start to hear and respond here and respond here. And it might be, people will obviously have it in different ways. For me, it's sort of like a feeling, a sense, and I kind of know that that's something that I need to work on. And I'd say when I first started on this more open path, because there was a time where I was just totally not open to it at all, just in my program, wanting something different, but just keep on going. As I sort of started to tune in more, the right book would come at the right time. The I'd bump into someone that would tell me about, like I said, Kundalini yoga, and I started on that, and then I did some Kundalini, and I'd like burst into tears because it was unblocking some, emotional stuff sitting in there. So I was like, oh, it feels so good, and I would start to get more light, like more. It would be moving stuff, and then it would validate that trust muscle, like trust in life's flow, trust. And so the more I trust, the more I know when to listen and when to move forward. It still can be challenging, and like going, I don't want to leave Byron. I want to live here, on my land, in this beautiful home, tropical home I've got. But I had the call that I needed to come back to Sydney, and I'm like, okay, I trust. I'm going to do it. It's going to close a chapter. It's going to open a new one. So, and I've landed here, and it's taken 6 months, but now I'm settling. I got a place, and I'm enjoying it. But I know that I'm on purpose, like being less out of the Broms into Fox feels so right now, and it's awesome. I feel great to be leading it and leading the team. So it's like, but when I went to Byron, I needed to, because my other business partner, Vic, who's my brother, he took the lead while I had left. So it was like, I had to let go of a leadership role. So leaving, I had to let go and not be attached to, my baby that I'd built. I wasn't going to lead it for that period. And so that was hard. So I was kind of stripping layers there, an ego that wanted to be the leader and stuff. And then I left, and I had that beautiful healing process in Byron, and then came back, and now I'm taking the leadership again. So like you said, it's like, and I'm just trusting that that's what I needed. And those 3 years have developed me into, I believe, a much better leader and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, so many things that you're talking about resonate with my personal experience, letting go of my other business from a leadership perspective or operating role to then starting something new. And whilst it's exciting when you're doing something new, you're still drawn to that comfort of what you've created, right? And it's like, dissolving that ego. But how interesting, because as you were speaking, what it reminded me of is that as we're dissolving that ego and attachment to an old identity that we have, or even environment that we are used to, we are preparing ourselves for the next big thing. So it's almost like getting really comfortable with, again, the discomfort to rebuild another layer of comfort in life. And that is where the growth is.
Yeah,
it's so powerful. I'm conscious that we could talk forever on this. Just to bring this discussion to a close, I'd love to hear from you any other book recommendations you have for our listeners today.
The yogi book, the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda, was just pivotal at one point in my journey. The Surrender Experiment, Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural. Even now, recently I've jumped back onto some of his meditations, his guided meditations, which I'm loving. And like he's got one about new potentials, really enjoying that. For healing, more the healing space is
the Celestian Prophecy.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, there's another one that's amazing. The Seat of the Soul.
Yep.
By Gary Eubank. The Seat of the Soul is a beautiful book around, detachment and ego and surrendering and going into flow.
Yeah. And there's even Think and Grow Rich, those sort of ones too. They start to touch on, if you're more just starting to play in that greater trust realm, but you want something a bit more businessy that the mind can latch on to. I find like Think and Grow Rich, great one. Sort of right at the end, he talks he brings a little bit of spirituality into it.
Sounds good. We'll add them on the caption. Well, thank you for your time today, Chris. I really appreciate it. It's been a very insightful conversation with you today.
Cheers.